lightning split the rain, as a soaked German shepherd appeared outside Luke's rental. Her puppy raced into the yard, and the mother wrapped herself around him. Then she left him, entered the storm, and looked back at the Navy SEAL. Beyond the trees, a missing woman was running out of time, and Sable knew the way. If you believe a sheltered life can guide us home, stay with this story. Rain had been falling on Brackenport for 22 days. It drummed on the pump yard's roof. Beyond the fence, the marsh had swallowed the low grass and climbed the cypress trunks. The town smelled of wet pine, diesel, and river mud. Luke Harrow stood beneath the hood of a portable pump, pretending to study its manifold. His gray shirt carried the logo of a maintenance company that existed mostly on paper. Rain darkened his brown hair and short stubble. At 30, he looked too broad for the service bay. But in Brackenport, a strong Bracken County work order opened doors. He turned the bezel of his old dive watch one click. 11:43 p.m. The inspection had not appeared on the town schedule. Neither had the white Graywake Marine van parked beside Bay 3. Its rear doors angled away from the security camera. Two men in rain jackets had unloaded 3 blue pump housings without scanning them into the municipal inventory system. They worked quickly and spoke only when the wind covered their voices. "I have the van plate," Luke murmured. Dana Cross answered through the small receiver tucked behind his right ear. Her voice was steady, almost dry enough to make the weather seem impolite. "It belongs to Graywake's calibration division, authorized for daytime access only." Dana was the investigator. Luke, an active-duty SEAL temporarily assigned as an equipment specialist, was there to identify naval hardware and observe. He held no independent authority to search, seize, or arrest. "This isn't daytime." Luke kept his eyes on the manifold. Across the yard, Clay Doran stepped out of Bay 3. Luke knew him from the case file. 46, operations superintendent, 18 years at Graywake, no criminal record, a house owned by the company, and enough debt to make loyalty difficult to measure. Clay wore no safety vest. He carried a clipboard beneath his coat and stopped twice to look toward the front gate. "He's nervous," Dana said, "or careful." "You say that like there's a difference." Luke had once mistaken careful for honest, and someone else had learned his source's name. Since then, he had treated information like a diver treated air, measured and guarded. He reached for a wrench and waited for Clay to return inside. Something scraped beneath the rain. Luke went still. The sound came again, faint and uneven, from the concrete drainage channel behind him. Not metal. Claws. He lowered the wrench and angled his flashlight toward the mouth of a storm culvert. Brown water slid through the narrow pipe, carrying pine needles and scraps of yellow grass. For several seconds there was nothing else. Then 2 small ears appeared above the lip of the drain. A German shepherd puppy pulled himself into the light. He could not have been more than 11 weeks old. His soaked black and tan coat clung to a frame made smaller by cold and exhaustion. Each step seemed to surprise him. He held something in his mouth, a dark bundle no larger than a man's hand, wrapped in oilskin and tied with gold thread. The puppy caught the machine oil on Luke's open tool bag and staggered toward it, dragging the bundle between his paws. Dana, hold. What changed? Luke was already moving. The puppy made it 3 more feet before his legs folded. He did not drop the bundle, even on the concrete, shivering so hard that his jaw trembled. He kept the oilskin pressed between his teeth. Luke crouched a few feet away and turned his body sideways. "Easy, little man." The puppy's eyes tracked him, dark and unfocused. Luke placed one gloved hand on the concrete, palm up, and waited. He had spent years reading rooms where a wrong movement could turn fear into panic. This was simpler, though not easier. The animal did not know his name, his uniform, or the reason he was standing in the rain. It knew cold. It knew the smell of oil. It knew the object in its mouth mattered because someone familiar had touched it. The puppy crept forward and pressed his nose against Luke's knuckles. Luke slid one arm beneath his chest and the other under his hindquarters. The little body felt frighteningly light. He tucked the puppy inside his rain jacket, leaving the head uncovered, and rose. Across the yard, Clay Doran had stopped beside the van. Luke lifted his chin toward the culvert. "I found a stray." Clay's gaze dropped to the oilskin bundle, still clenched in the puppy's mouth. His expression changed so slightly another man might have missed it. The clipboard tightened against his ribs. "Animal control won't come out in this weather," Clay said. "Then I won't call them." Luke turned before the answer could sound like a challenge. The glass-fronted dispatch room overlooked the service bays. Mavis Holt opened the door before he reached it, silver hair twisted through a pencil and reading glasses hanging from a beaded cord. "Please tell me that isn't what I think it is," she said. "Depends what you think it is. Trouble with pause? Then yes." Mavis cleared a space beside the radio console. Luke wrapped the puppy in 2 dry shop towels and asked for another, then a shallow bowl of lukewarm water. He did not place him against the electric heater. The puppy needed warmth gradually, not a blast of it. Luke dried the coat with slow pressure, checked the pale gums, then counted the breaths beneath his palm. Mavis studied him over the top of her glasses. "You really are a maintenance man?" "Tonight I am." The puppy's shivering began to ease. His jaw finally relaxed, and the oilskin bundle slipped onto the towel. Luke looked through the glass wall. Clay had returned to Bay 3. The van remained in place, rain washing its white panels clean. "Dana," he said quietly, "I found an object with the animal. Describe it, don't make conclusions." He photographed the bundle where it lay. The gold thread had been hand-sewn through one folded edge, tight enough to keep the oilskin closed. Luke used clean gloves and a pair of blunt scissors from the first aid cabinet. He cut only the knot, preserving the thread. Inside were 3 objects. The first was a plastic identification badge bearing the photograph of a woman with warm brown skin, close-cropped curls, and a level gaze. Eliza Lane. Quality Assurance. Graywake Marine Systems. The second was a broken inspection seal stamped with an anchor and a 6-digit naval supply code. The third was a narrow piece of waterproof drafting paper. Someone had drawn a rough floor plan in grease pencil. 2 rectangular rooms, a service corridor, and a circle around what looked like an old pump chamber. Beside the circle were 4 characters. B-17. Mavis leaned closer. "That's the old Bracken mill." Luke looked at her. "My father worked there before the textile company folded. Bay 17 was part of the drainage works." She touched the edge of the table, not the evidence. "Graywake rents storage on the south side now." Dana was silent for 2 beats. "Photograph everything. Secure the originals. We verify Lane before anyone moves." Luke slipped the items into separate evidence sleeves from his field kit. Mavis noticed the kit but said nothing. Outside, one of Clay's men rolled a blue housing toward the loading bay. Then came the sound. Chirp, chirp. Bright. Electronic. Almost delicate beneath the hammering rain. Luke's hand stopped over the last sleeve. The dispatch radios had gone quiet. The alarm panel showed no faults. Mavis glanced toward the console, but Luke was already looking through the glass at the blue housing below. Chirp, chirp. 5 years earlier, Luke had heard that paired note from a naval recovery beacon fixed to a disabled training craft. Its self-test tone did not belong inside a municipal flood pump, delivered after midnight without an inventory scan. He pressed 2 fingers to the receiver behind his ear. "Dana, we have an audible match." "Confidence?" "High." Naval Recovery Beacon self-test. 2 pulses, 4-second interval. "Record don't open. Your cover gives you access to the pump yard, not a warrant to dismantle Graywake property." Luke set his phone beside the glass and captured the next tone. Below, Clay lifted his head. He had heard it too. Clay crossed the bay in 6 hard steps and slapped his palm against the housing. The chirping stopped. He spoke sharply to the second man, who pulled the tarp over the unit. Mavis lowered the room lights without being asked. Reflections vanished from the glass, giving Luke a cleaner view. "Camera 6 covers that bay," she whispered. "Camera 9 covers the drain. Can you preserve tonight's feed? I can export a copy and lock the original against routine overwrite. Do both. Don't erase, edit, or loop anything." Mavis gave him another long look. "Maintenance man. Tonight." The puppy stirred beneath the towels. He pushed unsteadily onto his front paws, sniffed the empty place where the bundle had been, and released a thin, questioning whine. Luke crouched beside him. "It's safe." He did not know whether Eliza Lane was safe or how her badge had reached the culvert. He knew Clay had recognized the bundle, and a Navy beacon had spoken from inside a town pump. Mavis found a plastic pet carrier used years ago for a feral cat that had moved into the generator room. She lined it with a clean towel. Luke placed the puppy inside, but the little dog immediately pressed his nose against the door and watched him. "He'll need a name until we find his person," Mavis said. Luke looked at the small paws, the wet ears, and the stubborn eyes that had refused to surrender the bundle. "Pip," he said. Mavis smiled. "Small thing with a lot packed inside." Luke secured the evidence beneath his tool bag and lifted the carrier. Before leaving, he turned the bezel of his dive watch once more. 12:18 a.m. 35 minutes since the yard had been ordinary. After his truck disappeared through the gate, Clay Doran climbed the stairs to the dispatch room. Mavis had returned the lights to their usual setting and was entering rainfall totals into the county log. "Camera problem?" Clay asked. "Not that I've seen." Clay leaned over the console and replayed camera 9. He watched the puppy emerge from the culvert. He watched Luke kneel in the rain. Then he froze the image at the moment the gold-stitched bundle showed between the animal's teeth. Clay stepped into the stairwell and took out his phone. When Adrian Crow answered, Clay kept his voice low. The repairman found the package. By sunrise, Pip had decided Luke's left boot was the safest place in Brackenport. The puppy lay across it beneath the kitchen table, chin tucked over the laces, one damp ear raised whenever the rental house creaked. Luke had dried him again, offered small amounts of water, and warmed a spoonful of plain chicken from the emergency food in his truck. Pip ate carefully, nothing like the frantic hunger Luke had expected. Afterward, he searched every corner of the kitchen with his nose, returned to the tool bag, and whined at the empty pocket where the oilskin bundle had rested. Luke moved the evidence case to the top shelf of a locked cabinet. Pip watched the cabinet door close. Then he looked at Luke. "That isn't yours anymore," Luke said. The puppy put one paw on his boot and began chewing the lace. Strong counter-argument. Rain ticked against the windows rather than striking them. The storm had softened near dawn, but the drainage ditch behind the house remained full, a brown ribbon moving toward the marsh. Luke's rental stood behind a repair shop on the eastern edge of town. 2 rooms of mismatched furniture and peeling green paint. He had chosen it because the rear alley offered 3 exits. Now, a plastic pet carrier blocked one of them, and a water bowl sat where he normally placed his field pack. His secure phone vibrated on the counter. Dana Cross appeared on the screen without video. "Eliza Lane, 36, quality assurance specialist at Grey Wake for 7 years. No disciplinary record, no resignation letter." Luke set the phone beside the coffee maker and turned the burner off before the smell could fill the room. Grey Wake says she walked away. 3 days ago, 11 minutes after she flagged a serial mismatch on an internal test sheet. Her employee access stopped at 6:14 p.m. Her personal phone stopped moving at 6:19. Vehicle? Still outside her apartment. Purse inside. Neighbor says both dogs disappeared the same night. Luke looked down. Pip had fallen asleep with the lace between his teeth. "Mother and pup," he said. "Likely. The badge in your bundle is genuine. The Naval SEAL format is also genuine, but that specific number is listed as destroyed after a failed calibration batch 6 months ago." A destroyed SEAL doesn't chirp from inside a town pump. "No, it doesn't." Dana paused. "Get the puppy examined. Stay inside your cover. We're not calling Lane a victim until we know what happened." Luke turned the bezel of his dive watch. "Understood." The East Bridge reopened at 8:20. Luke placed Pip in Mavis Holt's old carrier, secured it behind the passenger seat, and took the county road toward the emergency veterinary clinic. The puppy complained for the first half-mile, then settled when Luke lowered one hand beside the carrier door, a small nose pressed against his knuckles through the grate. Blue lights flashed ahead. A state patrol SUV sat sideways across the road, where floodwater had covered the lower lane. Trooper Rosa Bell stood beside a row of orange cones, directing traffic through the high side. She wore a dark rain shell over her uniform, and her black hair was braided tight against the back of her neck. Her face was calm, but her eyes moved with the patient precision of someone who never accepted the first version of anything. She waved the truck forward, saw Luke, and lowered her hand. "Pull onto the shoulder." Luke obeyed. Rosa approached the driver's window without touching the door. "Luke Harrow?" "That's what the work order says." "I'm asking what you say." "Luke Harrow!" Pip barked once from behind the seat. Rosa glanced toward the carrier, then returned her attention to Luke. "Municipal security recorded you removing an unidentified object from a restricted pump yard at 12:14 this morning. I removed a wet puppy from a drainage culvert. The puppy was carrying something." "He was. Where is it?" Luke could have shown her the maintenance credential in his wallet. He could have given her Dana's number and ended the roadside performance. Instead, he remembered another room, another official face, another source whose name had traveled one desk too far. "Secured," he said. Rosa's gaze rested on him. That answer tends to create more questions. "You asked where it was." She looked past him at the tool bag on the floor. Graywake reported possible theft of proprietary calibration materials. Did they describe the materials? No. Then they don't know what was taken. The corner of Rosa's mouth tightened, not quite a smile. Or they know and don't want it in a report. For the first time, Luke reconsidered her place in the problem. Not trusted, not cleared, but perhaps not owned. Pip whined and scratched at the carrier. Rosa stepped back enough to see him. The puppy's ears were still soft at the tips, too large for his head. "Clinic is 2 miles east," she said. "High water at the second turn. Stay left." "Am I free to go?" "You're free to take the dog to a veterinarian." She leaned slightly toward the window. "After that, Mr. Harrow, we'll discuss the thing you secured." Luke drove on. The veterinarian found no injury beyond exposure, dehydration, and raw pads. Pip received warmed fluids beneath the skin and slept through most of the examination. By noon, Luke carried him back into the rental house with a bag of bland food, a list of instructions, and the uncomfortable awareness that Rosa Bell knew where to find him. Dana called once more. Bell requested the pump yard footage through the county system. Can she get it? Mavis preserved the original. Graywake has already asked for the same feed. Luke looked toward the locked cabinet. Clay saw the bundle before I did. Then assumed they're looking for the dog as well. He closed the curtains and checked the rear alley. Pip followed, stumbling over his own paws, then stopped beside the kitchen cabinet. His nose lifted toward the shelf. The day drained slowly into evening. Rain thickened again, turning the yard light into a pale blur. Luke fed Pip, cleaned the carrier, and built a sleeping place from 2 folded towels beside the sofa. The puppy ignored it and settled against Luke's boot. At 9:17, Pip's head snapped up. He did not bark. His body went rigid, ears aimed toward the back door. A second later came a faint scrape from the porch. Luke switched off the lamp and moved to the side of the window. At first he saw only his reflection, broad shoulders, dark hair, one hand near the flashlight at his belt. Then lightning split the sky. The yard turned white. A full-grown German shepherd stood ankle-deep in the flooded ditch, rain streaming from a black and tan coat. She was lean but powerful, with alert ears and a narrow strip of mud across her muzzle. She was not looking at the house. Her golden-brown eyes were fixed beyond it, toward a single amber light burning in the upper floor of Bracken Mill. Darkness closed again. Pip gave a cry so sharp it seemed too large for him. The dog in the ditch turned. Luke opened the back door but remained inside the frame. Pip pushed between his boots before Luke could stop him. The puppy stumbled down the 2 porch steps and splashed into the wet grass. The adult dog reached him in 3 strides. She lowered her head and swept her nose over his face, ears, belly, and paws. Pip climbed against her chest, whining, trying to lick beneath her jaw. She answered with a low sound and groomed the rein from his head in quick, urgent strokes. Her whole body curved around him, shielding him from the weather. Luke stayed still. The mother watched him over the puppy's back. There was no softness in her gaze, but no immediate threat either. She smelled the air, catching Pip, Luke, machine oil, and perhaps the familiar trace of Eliza on the secured bundle inside. "Sable?" Luke tried. One ear shifted. The name had come from an old veterinary invoice Dana found among Eliza's records. It listed an adult shepherd named Sable, but nothing about the unregistered puppy. Sable knew it. She looked toward the house, then at Pip again. Luke set a bowl of food just outside the door and stepped back. Sable approached only after he retreated. She ate several mouthfuls, drank, and checked her puppy once more. Then she left him. Not by accident, not because a sound frightened her. Sable walked to the edge of the yard, stopped, and looked directly at Luke. She turned toward the mill, moved 10 yards through the rain, and looked back again. Pip tried to follow. His legs slipped in the mud. Luke lifted him and placed him inside the house. He secured the door, set water beside the towels, and took his raincoat from the hook. When he stepped outside, Sable was waiting beneath the yard light. She led him along the drainage road at a steady trot. Luke followed in his truck until the pavement ended, then continued on foot. Sable did not search from side to side, or work an invisible scent trail washed clean by rain. She knew the route. At every junction, she chose without hesitation. Bracken Mill rose beyond the trees, 6 stories of dark brick and broken windows. Grey Wake had fenced the south yard with new steel mesh. Water moved through the old loading court, reflecting the one amber light high above. Sable slipped through a gap beneath the fence. Luke stopped outside. Entering would cross the line Dana had set, and the mud held fresh tire tracks. Someone else had arrived recently. Sable paced the inside perimeter, returned to one section of wire, and pawed at the wet ground. Something flashed beneath the security light. Luke crouched and reached through the mesh. A narrow metal bracelet had snagged on a twisted strand of fence. He photographed it before touching it, then used a clean glove to free it. Stamped into the inside curve were 2 words: Eliza Lane. Beyond the fence, Sable stared up at the amber window and began to whine. Luke held Eliza Lane's bracelet beneath the security light. While rain filled the letters of her name, the metal was warm from his gloved hand and bent near the clasp. It had not fallen cleanly. A strand of blue fabric remained pinched in the hinge, the same color as the Grey Wake quality assurance shirt in Eliza's employee photograph. Luke sealed the bracelet in an evidence sleeve, marked the time, and sent the images to Dana. Sable had already moved along the fence. She kept close to the steel mesh, nose low, but not casting for a trail. Every 20 yards, she stopped and looked back at Luke. The behavior was different from the searching patterns he had seen in trained working dogs. She was not trying to discover a route. She was checking that he stayed on one she already knew. "I'm at the south perimeter," Luke murmured into his receiver. Bracelet recovered outside the fence. "Fresh tire tracks inside," Dana answered at once. "No entry without an immediate threat." "Understood." That sounded almost sincere. Luke watched Sable disappear behind a curtain of rain. "I'll keep you informed." That sounded worse. He followed the public drainage easement west, staying outside Grey Wake's fence. The mill's brick wall ran beside him like a cliff, window frames black against the storm. Brackenport had once grown around this building. Generations had come through its doors before sunrise, worked beneath the loom belts, and gone home powdered with cotton dust. Now, vines covered the loading signs, but new conduit climbed one wall, and a modern security camera turned above a rusted fire escape. Sable waited at the mouth of a stone culvert, where runoff passed beneath the fence. One section of the old grate had pulled free from the mortar. Mud along the opening carried a set of human boot prints, narrow at the heel, leading inward. Several prints had filled with water, but the deepest still held a clear tread. Luke photographed them and crouched beside the gap. The culvert was barely 4 feet high. Water moved through it at ankle depth, slow enough to walk but dark beneath the building. Sable stepped toward the opening. Luke caught her collar. She pulled once, then looked back at him, breathing hard. Not alone. He clipped a utility line to the collar and looped the other end around his wrist. The dog could guide his attention, but she would not vanish into a flooded structure while he waited outside, pretending caution had no cost. "Dana, I have a breached culvert on the public easement. Human prints lead under the mill. Can you establish when they were made? No. Then document and hold." Sable leaned into the line. From somewhere inside came the faint metallic rattle of a generator carrying load. Luke turned the bezel of his dive watch. He had spent years learning the difference between patience and delay. The difference was usually visible only afterward, when someone asked why help had waited outside. "I'm checking the culvert mouth for a person in distress," he said. Dana exhaled. Body camera on. No locked doors, no containers, no evidence handling unless necessary for safety. Luke switched on the small camera beneath his rain shell and entered. The culvert opened into the mill's lower drainage gallery. He straightened beneath concrete beams, stained dark by decades of moisture. Water threaded across the floor toward iron grates. Sable moved without hesitation, following a raised maintenance strip along the wall. Luke kept the line short enough to stop her from stepping near exposed wiring. The building did not feel abandoned. A yellow extension cord ran overhead, dry and recently uncoiled. Fresh grease shone on a valve wheel. Someone had swept mud away from a steel door at the end of the gallery. Sable turned at a narrow staircase. One concrete step held a partial boot print matching those near the culvert. Higher up, Luke found an empty water pouch and the torn wrapper from a protein bar. Neither had been there long. The wrapper was dry beneath the stair lip. At the second floor, the old weaving room stretched into darkness. Loom mounts rose from the floor like rows of low headstones. Across the room, Plywood partitions enclosed a modern work area, lit by a single amber lamp. A portable generator ran behind it, muffled by insulated panels. Sable led Luke toward an overhead maintenance loft. The lower section of its metal staircase had collapsed, leaving a 12-foot gap between the floor and the surviving steps. On the loft above, someone had arranged a reflective emergency blanket, 2 water pouches, and a folded jacket behind a stack of wooden spools. A shelter. Luke zoomed his body camera toward it. One water pouch was empty. The other had been squeezed flat to its last mouthful. A blue shirt hung across a rail to dry. Sable gave a low whine and pulled toward a steel service door beneath the loft. Water covered the floor beyond its threshold. A severed cable hung close to the surface, its copper hidden somewhere in the darkness. Luke wrapped the line twice around his hand and held her back. "No," she strained, claws scraping concrete. Then a cough came through the door. Quiet. Human. Followed by a breath that caught before becoming another cough. Sable froze. Her ears lifted and her whole body angled toward the sound. Luke moved beside the door without touching it. "Eliza?" For several seconds, the generator covered everything. Then a woman's voice reached him through a rectangular vent near the ceiling. "Sable," the dog answered with one sharp bark. The change in Sable was immediate. Her weight shifted back from the dangerous threshold, though every muscle remained aimed at the voice above. She had not solved a mystery or understood the machinery around her. She had found one familiar sound in a building full of wrong ones, and for the moment, that was enough to keep her still. Luke pressed his receiver. Dana, living female confirmed, probable Eliza Lane, separated by a flooded service section with possible electrical hazard. I'm holding position. Good. County Rescue and State Patrol are being notified now. A white beam swept across the far wall. Hands where I can see them, Rosabelle called. Luke raised both hands slowly. Rosa stood near the culvert entrance, rainwater running from her dark patrol shell. Her flashlight remained centered on his chest, while her other hand rested near her holster. You have a habit of turning up where people report missing property, she said. There's a missing person above us. I heard. Her light shifted to the body camera, the utility line, and Sable. Who are you talking to? Luke had reached the point where secrecy no longer protected the same person. He touched the receiver, but did not remove it. Special Agent Dana Cross, NCIS. Rosa's expression did not change. Convenient. Dana's voice came through Luke's phone speaker after a secured callback. She gave Rosa a case reference number and the name of an Atlanta supervisor who could verify it through official channels. Rosa made the call herself, keeping Luke in sight until the answer returned. When she lowered her phone, irritation had replaced suspicion. It was not warmer, but it was more useful. Luke knew the look. Trust had not entered the room. Responsibility had. Rosa now possessed information that could protect Eliza or expose the investigation, and Luke could no longer control which choice she made. His thumb found the ridged edge of his watch bezel, but he stopped before turning it. You let me stop you on a flooded road without mentioning a federal investigation. You hadn't been cleared. And now? Luke looked at the steel door. Another cough drifted through the vent. Now, Eliza needs someone with local authority. Rosa keyed her radio, requested fire rescue equipment for a confined industrial space, and gave the mill's south coordinates. Then she approached the door and identified herself loudly. Eliza answered again, weak but coherent. She said the loft stairs had failed beneath her the previous evening. Water had risen across the only remaining exit. We're getting you out, Rosa called. Do not enter the water. Sable settled beside the door, still tense but no longer pulling. Luke loosened the line without releasing it. Rosa studied the modern partitions across the weaving room. Show me why NCIS cares about a flood pump company. They stayed within the open work area while waiting for rescue. 4 municipal pump housings stood on steel cradles. One side panel had been removed and left against a workbench. Inside the housing, the expected impeller assembly occupied only half the cavity. The other half contained padded brackets, a power lead, and anchor points sized for a compact electronic unit. Above the junction with the discharge gallery hung an old counterweighted safety gate. Its corroded trigger linkage was still fastened to the nearest catwalk support, a relic designed to isolate the machine room if heavy equipment broke loose. Luke photographed the open cavity. A recovery beacon would fit there. Would. The one I heard last night would. Rosa aimed her light at the workbench. There were no beacons, only foam cutouts and loose screws. So, the pumps are boxes with paperwork. We don't have enough to say that yet. You federal people make suspicion sound tidy. Luke leaned near the open housing without touching it. The smell struck him first. Sharp ozone cut through the mud, wet brick, and machine oil. It was the clean metallic scent left after high-voltage electronics had been energized. Luke stopped breathing for half a beat. The housing was empty, but something inside the mill had been powered recently. He turned toward the plywood wall. A thin blue indicator glowed through a seam near the floor. "This place is active," he said. Rosa saw it too. She killed her flashlight. Darkness settled around them, making the blue line brighter. From the other side of the wall came the scrape of metal across concrete. Luke guided Sable behind a loom base. Rosa moved beside him and muted her radio. Neither drew closer. Their job had changed from searching to listening. A man grunted with effort. Another object struck the floor. Luke recognized Clay Doran's voice. "She hid it in here." Clay Doran dragged something heavy across the floor on the other side of the plywood wall, then stopped close enough for Luke to hear him breathe. Rosa remained beside the loom base, one hand on her muted radio. Luke held Sable's line against his thigh. The dog stared toward the service door, where Eliza waited, but she did not pull. Her ears moved between the woman above and the man behind the wall. "Crow said she copied the traveler's sheet," Clay told someone Luke could not hear. "Find the original before the water rises." A drawer slammed, metal struck metal, then footsteps moved toward the north side of the mill. Luke waited until a door closed before standing. Rosa kept her voice low. "We have a living person trapped, a possible electrical hazard, and a company superintendent searching the building. That gives me enough to secure the rescue area. It does not give you permission to chase him. I wasn't planning to. You have a face that makes that difficult to believe." They returned to the flooded service door. Eliza answered Rosa's call, weaker than before, but alert. She explained that a maintenance catwalk crossed above the submerged room and reached the surviving loft stairs. Its access hatch was inside the Graywake work enclosure. Rosa radioed the route to county rescue. The reply came through broken by static. A truck carrying rope gear was approaching from the east, but high water had closed the direct road. 25 minutes, the dispatcher said. Maybe 30. Luke looked at the water beneath the door. It had climbed nearly an inch since he entered. "Show me the catwalk," Rosa said. They crossed the open work floor without touching the equipment. Sable stayed on a short lead between them. Behind the plywood partition, they found an unlocked corridor and a graded stair leading to the upper maintenance level. Clay had left in haste. A rolling cabinet stood open, its shallow drawers emptied onto the floor. At the top of the stairs, Luke found 3 naval recovery beacons laid on a padded cart. Their identification plates were intact. Each number matched a unit Dana's preliminary list marked as destroyed after failed calibration. He recorded the numbers through his body camera. Authentic units removed from the housings. Rosa pointed toward the far wall. And those? 6 cheaper locator units sat beneath gray covers. They carried Graywake labels and municipal inventory stickers, but their antenna bases were narrower, and their casings lacked the reinforced marine seals visible on the Navy models. Luke did not lift the covers. Possible substitutes? We need a technical examination before we call them counterfeit. The catwalk access hatch stood beyond a pump housing connected to the wall by a temporary power cable. Its display was dark. Luke stepped around it, then rested one hand on the casing to steady himself. The metal trembled beneath his palm, not the loose vibration of the generator. A tight mechanical pulse traveled through the housing, stopped, and returned. The unit appeared dead, yet a bypass circuit was moving something behind the wall. Luke pulled his hand away. "This line is still active." Rosa followed the cable to a junction box. A handwritten label read, "South Discharge, Remote." Can it open the floodgate? If this housing controls the bypass, yes. Luke photographed the cable path and the label. The catwalk hatch beyond it had been padlocked. Rosa could force access for the rescue, but cutting power without knowing the circuit might activate the gate or energize the water below. "We wait for the electrical tech," she said. It was the right decision. Luke disliked it anyway. Sable pressed her muzzle against the catwalk mesh and whined. Through the gap, Luke could see the edge of Eliza's reflective blanket on the loft. 12 feet of broken stair and a flooded chamber separated them. "Eliza," he called. Rescue is coming by the upper catwalk. Stay where you are." "My dogs?" she asked. "Both alive." Silence followed, then a shaky breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Pip got out?" "He carried your bundle with him." "He found it?" Eliza's voice steadied. "My phone's security app could track me, so I left it at Greywake and used the storm culvert to reach the mill. I meant to reach Jonah after shift change, but Clay watched the service road. Yesterday he came inside. I dropped the bundle near the drain. Pip grabbed it, and Sable drew Clay away until he escaped. Then the stairs failed." Luke looked at the mud-dark opening below. Pip had not understood the evidence. He had carried the thing that smelled of Eliza and refused to release it. "Good boy," Eliza whispered. Sable struck the mesh once with her paw. Luke gave Rosa the catwalk route, electrical warning, and rising water estimate without withholding a line. She repeated the critical points over her radio and assigned each one to the incoming crew. Nothing became weaker because another person carried it. Footsteps sounded below. Clay stood at the base of the grated stairs. He stared at Luke, Rosa, and the open cabinet. Rain shone on his coat, though he had entered from deeper inside the building. "This is private property," he said. Rosa descended 2 steps. "There is a missing woman trapped in this structure. State Patrol is securing it for emergency rescue." Clay looked past her at Luke's body camera. His face lost what little color it had. "There's nobody here." Eliza coughed from beyond the catwalk. Clay's eyes moved toward the sound. That brief turn said more than his denial. "Step away from the controls," Rosa ordered. He obeyed, but his gaze dropped to the wet prints Luke had left beside the pump housing. He saw the photographed cable, the exposed beacon cart, and the empty drawers. Luke watched him understand how much had been found. Clay backed toward the corridor. "I'm calling corporate counsel." "You may call anyone you want from outside the rescue perimeter," Rosa said. He left without arguing. A moment later, an engine started near the north loading dock. Rosa swore softly under her breath, caught herself, and keyed her radio. Before she could report Clay's departure, the dispatcher broke in with a priority call. "Vehicle off Marsh Causeway near marker 6. 2 occupants. Caller reports roof visible, current increasing. Automated locator has not transmitted." Rosa looked at Luke. Marker 6 was 4 miles away. The county rope truck approaching the mill was the closest rescue unit. Eliza's voice reached them through the vent. "Go, the water here is slow." Luke checked the level, rising but not yet fast. "We need the electrical tech and insulated gear before crossing anyway." Rosa confirmed the electrical technician was 12 minutes away and the second crew 18. The loft would remain dry for more than an hour under the current forecast. She ordered the arriving officer to maintain voice contact, keep everyone outside the electrical hazard, and report any change. Only then did she redirect the rope truck, take Sable, and order Luke outside with her. At marker 6, a pickup rested on its side in the flooded ditch, held against 2 pines. An older couple stood through the passenger window, with water at their waists. A delivery driver had seen the truck leave the road and called it in. Without him, no alert would have reached dispatch. Rosa and the rescue crew anchored a line to a utility pole. Luke stayed within the role Dana had authorized, advising on the current and helping rig a stable approach from the high shoulder. 20 minutes later, both occupants were wrapped in blankets inside an ambulance. The driver kept asking why the emergency light had stayed green. His wife sat beside him, gripping a wool blanket at her throat, staring at the ditch as if their truck might answer. Rosa offered no reassurance she could not support. She photographed the installation and asked dispatch to preserve every inbound signal from the previous hour. The Greywake emergency locator remained bolted beneath the pickup's rear seat. Its status light glowed green. Dispatch had received nothing. Jonah Reed arrived in a county emergency vehicle as the rain intensified. He was 61, with a gray mustache trimmed like a straight line, and the stiff left knee of a man who had spent years climbing steel ladders at sea. The patch on his jacket identified him as Bracken Port's emergency management chief. He knelt beside the open truck door and checked the locator's serial number twice. "This unit passed acceptance 11 days ago." "Who certified it?" Rosa asked. "Greywake." Jonah's jaw tightened. Their report showed a coded test burst received by the county acceptance monitor. Luke showed him the recording from the pump yard and photographs of the authentic beacon plates at the mill. Jonah watched without interruption. When the final image appeared, he sat back on his heel. "Those 3 Navy units were listed on our disposal cross-check," he said. "Graywake gave us the certificates." "Do you retain the maintenance originals?" Luke asked. "Paper and server copies. My office?" Jonah stood. "If those certificates are false, every locator installed this month is suspect." They drove to the Emergency Operations Center, a concrete building above the floodplain. Jonah opened a locked records room and removed a binder marked September Acceptance. Each Graywake certificate carried the signature of calibration technician Beck Rowe. Attached logs claimed successful coded test bursts at times when the county acceptance monitor had recorded no matching transmission. The green lamp in the pickup had confirmed only local power and an internal self-check, not receipt by dispatch. Jonah gave Rosa the originals against a receipt and transferred copies to Dana through an official channel. Then he opened the town's control map and selected Bracken Mill. "The old machine room has 2 entrances," he said. "Upper Catwalk and South Discharge Gallery. This code opens the gallery from the municipal side." He wrote 6 digits on a card and handed it to Rosa. "The South Discharge diverts floodwater through the mill's old race. Graywake's contract allowed read-only diagnostics on the actuator. Their credentials should never have had command authority." An alarm appeared on the control screen. "South Discharge, manual override." Jonah stared at it. That command didn't come from us. The status changed from yellow to red. Gate cycle initiated. Luke turned the bezel of his watch and looked at the projected flood estimate. The first surge would reach Bracken Mill in 53 minutes. "Someone using Graywake credentials activated the emergency discharge," Jonah said. Luke was already reaching for the rescue line cabinet. 53 minutes became 46 before Luke's truck reached Bracken Mill. Rain hammered the windshield. Beside him, Sable stood braced against the seat, watching the dark shape of the mill grow beyond the wipers. Rosa followed in her patrol SUV, with 2 county rescue vehicles behind her. Dana coordinated the warrant and federal response through Luke's receiver. Jonah remained at emergency operations, trying to cancel the discharge command without triggering a second gate. "Override is locked to Graywake's remote terminal," Jonah said over the shared channel. "I can slow the cycle, not stop it." "How long?" Rosa asked. "First surge in 42 minutes. Full flow 9 minutes after that." Luke parked on the high side of the south yard. The officer guarding the mill reported Eliza still responsive, though water now covered the lower half of the service door. No sign of Clay. Graywake's vehicles were gone. Rosa faced the rescue team beneath the awning. "Primary objective is Eliza Lane. Evidence comes out only if it does not delay her rescue. Luke advises on the access system. He does not operate independently." Luke accepted the orange flotation line she handed him. 4 chapters ago, he would have heard the restriction and prepared to work around it. Now he checked the line, returned it, and said, "Understood." They entered through the Municipal South Gallery using Jonah's 6-digit code. A county electrician isolated the severed cable and confirmed the catwalk frame remained clear of current. Sable wore a borrowed flotation harness and stayed clipped to Rosa's belt, while Luke crossed the upper grating with 2 rescuers. The Eliza waited on the maintenance loft beneath the reflective blanket. Up close, she looked exhausted rather than helpless. Close-cropped curls damp against her forehead, blue work shirt torn at one sleeve, one hand wrapped around a rusted railing. Her brown eyes moved from Luke to the rescuers and then past them. "Where's Sable?" Luke pointed through the grating. The dog stood below, staring up. Eliza's shoulders lowered by an inch. "And Pip?" "Warm, fed, and chewing through my bootlaces." That earned a brief smile. "Then he's himself." The rescuers bridged the broken stair gap with a rigid ladder and fitted Eliza into a safety harness. As they prepared to move, she caught Luke's sleeve. "The proof isn't in the bundle," she said. "That was only enough to make someone look." "Where?" "Pump B17. I put the original traveler sheet and Graywake's control sample inside the inspection sleeve behind the impeller plate. The sample has the real serial and failed calibration mark." Luke looked at the water below. "We get you out first. Crow will flush it. Then Dana will prosecute an obstruction case with what survives. You don't stay here for paper." Eliza studied him, then released his sleeve. The first rescuer guided her across the ladder. Luke remained behind until she reached the catwalk, refusing the old instinct to split himself between every task at once. He had spent most of his adult life believing the safest plan was the one he carried alone. The belief had made him useful in narrow places and unbearable in ordinary ones. Here, with Rosa controlling the perimeter, Dana protecting the legal chain, and 2 rescuers holding Eliza's weight, there was nothing noble about adding himself to every burden. He watched each buckle clear the broken stair before moving. Trust did not mean closing his eyes. It meant keeping them open while another person held the line. At the gallery landing, Sable surged forward. Rosa unclipped her only after Eliza had both feet on dry concrete. The dog pressed against Eliza's legs, sweeping her nose over the torn sleeve and wrapped wrist. Eliza sank to one knee and held Sable's neck without speaking. Sable leaned into her for 3 breaths, then turned her head toward the flooded machine room. "She knows where I hid it," Eliza said. "She knows the room," Luke answered. "That's enough." Dana's voice came through. "Emergency warrant signed. Recover B-17 if the rescue supervisor approves." The supervisor checked the clock and water level. 31 minutes. 2-person entry, tethered, 5 minutes inside. Lane stays out. Eliza objected once. Rosa placed an evidence receipt in her hand and asked her to describe the hiding place on camera. Eliza gave the plate location, tape color, sleeve orientation, and exact order of the contents. Her voice steadied with every detail. Luke repeated the instructions back. Only then did she nod. The proof could leave the room without requiring her to enter it again. Luke and Rosa crossed the upper catwalk to pump B-17. The machine stood on a steel cradle above shallow water. Rosa anchored both tethers while Luke removed the inspection plate with insulated tools. Behind it sat a clear document sleeve taped above the impeller cavity. Inside were a folded traveler sheet, a compact calibration board tagged Control Sample, and a red failure label bearing Beck-Rose initials. Luke photographed the placement before removing the sleeve. He passed it to Rosa, who sealed it in a dry evidence pouch and recorded the time. "We have it," she told Dana. A deep impact rolled through the building. The water beneath the catwalk reversed direction. It had been drifting toward the south drains. Now it pulled north, paused, and rushed back with enough force to lift loose boards from the floor. Jonah shouted over the radio that a second command from Grey Wake's credentials had advanced the gate cycle. "Everyone out," the rescue supervisor ordered. Luke and Rosa moved toward the gallery. Halfway there, an unsecured empty pump housing shuddered on its wheeled service cradle. One steel wheel climbed the rail. The broad blue shell began sliding across the flooded floor. It moved slowly for 1 second, then the current caught its broad side. "Luke!" Rosa shouted. He stepped back as the housing tore free and swept beneath the catwalk. It struck the support where he had been standing, folding a handrail inward. The grating jumped under his boots. The evidence pouch nearly left Rosa's hand, but its tether held. The collision triggered an old safety gate between them. Steel dropped from the ceiling with a brutal crash. Rosa made it through. Luke did not. He stood on the machine room's side, separated by vertical bars as water climbed over his boots. The catwalk behind him had twisted away from the wall. His tether ran through the gate, pinched beneath its lower edge. Rosa pulled. The rope did not move. "Cut free and take the east ladder," she ordered. Luke saw the ladder 20 feet away. The lower section was already underwater, and the current carried broken boards across its base. Still possible. Barely. He cut the trap tether and moved along the remaining grating. Eliza was being carried toward the south exit. Sable resisted, looking back at him until Eliza took the harness handle. "Sable, with me," Eliza said. The dog obeyed for 6 steps. Another surge hit. The catwalk tore loose beneath Luke's left foot. He caught a vertical support and swung against it while the grating dropped into the water. His shoulder absorbed the impact. Below him, the blue pump housing turned in the current like a battering ram. The east ladder vanished. Luke climbed down the support to a narrow concrete ledge. Water reached his thighs and rose. The main current crossed the center of the room, but a slower eddy circled near the wall. "No direct crossing," the supervisor said. "We rig from the gallery." Rosa retrieved the orange flotation line. She wrapped it around a structural column, locked the anchor, and threw the free end through the safety bars. It fell short, landing in the fast channel where the current carried it back against the gate. She tried again. Same result. Luke's boots slipped on the ledge. He locked one arm around the support and forced himself to breathe evenly. The water was not the ocean, but his body remembered black swells, weight, and the thin margin between control and panic. Rosa looked toward Eliza. Did Sable retrieve lines from water? Dock lines and floating bumpers, Eliza said. Only calm water, never this. Rosa studied the room. The center channel was violent, but the wall eddy between the gallery and Luke moved in a slow circle. She doesn't enter the main flow. Eliza knelt beside Sable and pointed to the orange rope. Line. Sable touched it with her nose. Take line. The dog closed her teeth around the padded end. Rosa held the anchored side, while a rescuer clipped a safety lead to Sable's flotation harness. Nobody released control of her. Eliza pointed toward Luke. Bring. Sable stepped into the shallow edge. The first current pushed against her chest, and she backed out. Eliza did not force her. She gave the cue again, quieter. Sable entered beside the wall. The safety lead followed from the rescuer's hands. She swam across the slow eddy, carrying only the free end, head high, and eyes fixed on the concrete ledge. Halfway over, floating debris bumped her shoulder. She changed angle, kept inside the sheltered water, and paddled on. Luke loosened one arm from the support. Come on, Sable. The dog reached the ledge, but could not climb it. She planted her front paws against the concrete, water streaming from her muzzle. The orange line remained locked between her teeth. Luke stretched down until his shoulder burned. His fingers missed once. Sable kicked harder, lifting her head. The end of the line struck Luke's wrist. He closed his hand around it. Across the room, Sable braced all four paws against the submerged edge and refused to let go. The rescue line tightened across the water, but Sable did not pull Luke from the machine room. Rosa's anchor system did that. Two rescuers hauled behind the structural column, while a third controlled Sable's safety lead. Luke wrapped the orange rope around his forearm, kicked away from the submerged ledge, and let the team take his weight. The current turned him once before the line brought him against the safety bars. Rosa reached through and locked both hands around his wrist. I have him. The team lifted Luke over the lower rail and onto the gallery floor. He rolled onto his side, coughing river water, while the south discharge thundered through the chamber behind him. Sable released the rope only after Eliza gave the command. She shook water across everyone within 6 feet, then pushed her muzzle against Luke's shoulder. He rested one hand on her wet neck. Good retrieve, he managed. Eliza knelt beside them, wrapped in a county rescue blanket. She brought the line, they brought you. Luke looked at Rosa and the rescue crew securing the gate. That distinction matters. They cleared Bracken Mill 4 minutes before the main surge filled the lower gallery. From the high yard, Luke watched water strike the broken windows and carry loose equipment across the machine floor. Pump B-17 remained bolted to its cradle, empty of the sleeve the surge had nearly erased. Dana Cross arrived before dawn in a plain federal vehicle. She was a tall black woman with close-cut hair and a charcoal raincoat, her expression composed despite the mud climbing both boots. She accepted the sealed evidence pouch from Rosa, checked every signature and timestamp, then placed it inside a locked transport case. Traveler sheet, control sample, failure label, Rosa said, recovered under emergency warrant. Lane described placement on camera before entry. Municipal records? Dana asked. Originals secured at State Patrol, copies transmitted from Jonah Reed's office. Dana looked toward Luke, who sat on the ambulance step with an ice pack against his shoulder. You followed the rescue supervisor's direction? Mostly. Rosa folded her arms. He did. The answer landed harder than praise. Luke had spent years assuming trust was something other people requested before mishandling it. Rosa offered it without ceremony, and without forgetting what he had kept from her. The rescue supervisor joined them with a wet clipboard. Every member of the team had cleared the mill. No one had been left in the lower gallery, and the anchored line had held without damage. He recorded Sable's role precisely, trained retrieval of a floating free end through sheltered water while attached to a safety lead. The report credited Eliza's cue, Rosa's anchor, the handlers on the safety line, and the crew that hauled Luke. Luke signed beneath his own statement. Turning a rescue into a legend would have been easy. Writing down how many hands it required felt more honest. Dana closed the transport case. The override command is preserved on the town server. It proves the gate was activated from Greywake's credentials. It does not yet prove who touched the terminal. So we prove that next, Rosa said. No one promised a simple ending. They had something better. Evidence that could survive daylight. Eliza rode to the hospital for dehydration and observation. Sable went in the rescue truck beside her, still wearing the flotation harness. Luke returned to the rental house with Rosa just after sunrise. Pip heard the truck before it stopped. His bark came through the door in a rapid, uneven series. When Luke opened it, the puppy skidded across the kitchen floor, struck his boot, and tried to climb his leg. Eliza arrived that afternoon after being released. She sat on the floor before Luke could offer a chair. Pip crossed the room in a blur and disappeared against her chest. His paws caught in the blanket around her shoulders while he licked her chin and whined. Sable approached more slowly. She touched her nose to Pip's back, then leaned her full weight against Eliza's side. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Luke stood by the counter with the empty evidence cabinet behind him. The rental had never looked more temporary. Dog towels covered 2 chairs. A water bowl sat near the rear door. One bootlace had become a damp fringe. Eliza looked up. "You named him Pip?" Mavis helped. "His name is Edison." Luke considered the puppy, now stuck halfway through the blanket. "He doesn't look like an Edison. He chewed an electrical cord the day I brought him home." "Pip is safer," Eliza smiled. "Pip can stay." Luke gave her the veterinary instructions, medication schedule, and the receipt he had folded into his wallet. He described what Pip had eaten, how much water he had taken, and the way he searched for the oilskin whenever the cabinet opened. Eliza listened without interrupting. When Luke finished, she reached for the food bag rather than the puppy, checking the label and dosage first. That small act settled something in him. He had not rescued an animal who now belonged to him. He had kept someone else's family safe long enough for them to find one another again. Pip left Eliza's lap, crossed the kitchen, and planted himself on Luke's boot. Eliza laughed softly. "He does that when he trusts the floor under him." Luke looked down at the oversized ears and frayed lace. "He has expensive standards." Eliza held out her hand. Pip considered the choice for half a second, then returned to her. The investigation did not end in that kitchen. It widened. The control sample from B-17 carried the serial assigned to a Navy beacon Greywake had reported destroyed. Its calibration mark showed the unit had failed. The traveler sheet documented an order to move authentic beacons into private inventory, while substitute locators received copied acceptance numbers. Jonah's maintenance logs connected those numbers to town vehicles and flood stations. Clay Doran surrendered through an attorney the next morning. He admitted moving equipment and searching the mill for Eliza's records. Cooperation did not erase his choices. It gave investigators a map of them. Beck Rowe came forward 2 days later with the original electronic test files. Crow had used Beck's earlier alteration of a minor inspection date to threaten his license and livelihood. Beck acknowledged signing false certificates and entered a cooperation agreement subject to court review. A forensic image of Greywake's control terminal preserved Crow's authenticated session, and building access records placed him at the workstation when the second gate command was sent. Adrian Crow was indicted by a federal grand jury and later appeared for arraignment, not carried away in a convenient midnight scene. His attorneys challenged the warrants and every link in the evidence chain. Dana had expected that. Photographs, body camera footage, preserved security files, municipal logs, and the sealed control sample answered in the language courts understood. Greywake's contracts were suspended while independent teams replaced every questionable locator. Jonah Reed led the town audit and read each serial number himself. Mavis gave formal testimony about the midnight inspection and the original camera feed. Rosa's report separated what she had witnessed from what investigators still needed to prove. 8 weeks later, Rain returned to Brackenport as a light afternoon shower. The pump yard dispatch room smelled of wet coats and overheated coffee. Mavis poured 3 cups from the machine and handed one to Luke. He took a sip. The coffee was sweet enough to hurt a tooth. For an instant, he was back on the first night, with Pip shivering beneath shop towels and a gold-stitched bundle lying between them. The taste had not improved. Everything around it had changed. Rosa sat across the table in plain clothes, reviewing the final equipment replacement list. Eliza occupied the chair beside her, one hand resting on Sable's head. Pip slept beneath the table with his chin across Luke's left boot, exactly where he had begun. "You can admit the coffee is terrible," Rosa said. "Mavis is standing behind me." "Good situational awareness," Mavis replied. The original oilskin remained sealed with the case materials. From a matching piece of the same roll she had kept at home, Eliza cut a narrow strip and stitched its edge with gold thread. She folded it into a small dark scarf and fastened it around Pip's neck. He woke, tried to bite the knot, and rolled onto his back. "Still, Pip," Luke said. "Definitely Pip," Eliza agreed. Luke was scheduled to leave Brackenport the following morning. His technical assignment had ended, his borrowed work orders were closed, and the rental house was almost empty again. That should have felt clean. Instead, every departure he had made before seemed to stand behind this one, a row of locked doors with no forwarding address. He placed a photograph on the table. Mavis had taken it outside the mill after the water receded. Eliza kneeling between Sable and Pip, Rosa beside her, Luke at the edge pretending he had not noticed the camera. On the back, he had written his real mailing address and a secure number that would remain active after the case. Eliza read it, then looked at him. "Is this in case Pip destroys another bootlace?" "That depends. Are you planning to reimburse me?" "No." "Then it's for updates." She did not turn the moment into a promise. She slid the photograph into her bag as carefully as she had once hidden the traveler sheet. Luke felt his thumb move toward the bezel of his dive watch. He stopped. There was no countdown running. Sable rose from Eliza's chair and crossed to a storage hook near the dispatch door. The old orange rescue line had been cleaned and retired after the mill operation. Its padded end hung low enough for her to reach. She took it gently, carried it to Luke, and laid it across his boots. The action required no miracle. The rope was familiar, the room was safe, and retrieval was what Eliza had taught her to do. Still, as Sable looked from the line to Luke, the simplest explanation did not make the gift feel small. Luke bent and rested his hand between her ears. Outside, rain traced soft lines down the dispatch windows, no longer loud enough to hide anything. He left the rope at his feet and the door behind him unlocked. Luke Harrow entered Brackenport believing that protection meant carrying every secret and every risk alone. But when the water rose inside Bracken Mill, his strength was not enough by itself. Rosa anchored the line. The rescue team carried his weight. Eliza trusted others with the evidence she had guarded, and Sable used one simple skill, taught with patience long before the storm, to place the free end of that line within Luke's reach. That orange rope became more than rescue equipment. It was proof that courage does not always look like standing alone against the current. Sometimes courage is accepting the line someone else is holding. Sometimes it is telling the truth before silence puts another life at risk. And sometimes it is a loyal dog carrying something small through the water, because love and training have taught her where to return. Pip's gold-stitched scarf carried the same lesson. Eliza made it from the same roll of oilskin as the bundle that remained sealed in evidence, turning a matching piece into something warm and safe. The material did not lose its past, but its past no longer decided its only purpose. Luke discovered the same truth when he left his real address behind. Opening one door did not erase every betrayal he had known. It simply gave trust somewhere new to begin. Today, think of one person who may be carrying more than anyone can see. Send a message, make the call, offer one practical kindness without waiting to be asked. You may never know how far that small act will travel, or when it may find its way back to you. Perhaps miracles are not always sudden flashes in the darkness. Perhaps some arrive as ordinary hands holding a rope, a brave animal refusing to abandon it, and enough people choosing to help at the same time. If this story reminded you that no one is meant to face the storm alone, share it with someone who needs that message. Tell us in the comments about an animal or person who once guided you home. And subscribe with the notification bell turned on for more stories of courage, loyalty, and hope.